U.S. government shutdown over arguments over border wall funding. U.S. markets endure their worst week in nearly a decade.
Hello and a very good evening. The US government has partially shut down. US President Donald Trump's demand for $5 billion to fund a border wall was the divide between Democrats and Republicans. Peter Corveos has our top story.
The chair declares the House in recess, subject to the call of the chair.
Those words signaled a partial shutdown of the U.S. federal government as Democrats and Republicans remained at an impasse on a budget.
Going to have a shutdown. There's nothing we can do about that because we need the Democrats to give us their votes. Let's get out, let's work together, let's be bipartisan, and let's get it done. The shutdown hopefully will not last long.
The sticking point was the proposed wall on the Mexican border.
Our great country must have border security. We don't want people coming in that aren't supposed to be here. We want people to come in through a legal process.
President Trump, you will not get your wall. Abandon your shutdown strategy. You're not getting the wall today, next week, or on January 3rd when Democrats take control of the House.
The finger pointing then escalated.
There's nothing we can do about that because we need the Democrats to give us their votes. Call it a Democrat shutdown, call it whatever you want.
Well, Mr. President, the events of the past week should concern every American. This may have been the most chaotic week of what's undoubtedly the most chaotic presidency ever in the history of the United States.
How did we get here? The House passed a short-term spending bill earlier in the week which would have kept the government running till February 8th, but it did not include funding for the wall. Following a backlash from conservatives, Trump reversed course and refused to sign the bill, which triggered the shutdown. 9 cabinet-level U.S. departments will be affected, including Homeland Security. Ironic, considering the wall's purpose would be increased border security. It also forces some 800,000 federal employees to go on furlough or work without pay just days before Christmas. The shutdown is the third during Trump's administration. In a glimmer of hope, the House and Senate both scheduled rare Saturday sessions as negotiations continue. Peter Corveos, TVB News.
Just prior to the U.S. government shutdown, Trump signed rare bipartisan legislation that addresses concerns with the American criminal justice system.
Now to a very positive note. Criminal justice reform. Everybody said it couldn't be done. They said the conservatives won't approve it. They said the liberals won't approve it. They said nobody's going to approve it. Everybody's going to be against it. It's been many, many years, numerous decades, and nobody came close. And I just want to thank all of the people standing behind me. I want to thank Mitch. I want to thank Nancy and Chuck, as I said, affectionately, actually.
The legislation is designed to keep petty drug offenders from being sent to jail. It gives judges more discretion when sentencing, and it will boost prisoner rehabilitation efforts.
It was another day of huge losses on Wall Street as the US market ended with its worst weekly performance in 7 years. And as they look ahead, investors are finding more reasons to worry, with the US locked in a trade war with China and economies in Europe and Asia slowing down. Alan Buckner reports.
Following yesterday's 1.8% drop in the Dow, 2% loss by the S&P, and 3% plunge on the Nasdaq, the major U.S. indices have lost 16 to 26% from their highs this summer and fall.
It's certainly not helping that we're getting, I won't even call it uncertainty out of Washington, we're just getting continued unrest. It just seems that it's the story of the day. You know, every time something out of Washington comes, you don't know whether that's the story that's going to hold for another week, day, or two, depends on the next tweet.
Investors are very fearful that the growth of the U.S. economy and the global economy are going to slow down a lot next year and the year after that, and that there could even be a recession either in the U.S. or for the entire world economy.
Most analysts agree that the government shutdown shouldn't have a major effect on the markets unless it drags out. And the American economy has been robust, with GDP expected to grow by 3% this year.
We think that equity markets have overreacted, that the broader macroeconomy, especially in the United States, while it should slow down next year, is still going to keep growing at a pretty healthy pace, about trend.
There are risks ahead with the slowing global economy, disruptions caused by the US-China trade war, and higher borrowing costs as the Federal Reserve raises interest to control inflation, just to name a few. Traders often talk about a Santa rally that boosts the market as investors adjust their portfolios at year's end. Barring huge gains in the upcoming holiday period, U.S. stocks are headed for their worst month since October 2008, when the market was battered by the global financial crisis. Alan Buknia, TVB News.
Meanwhile, the Bloomberg News Agency is reporting that President Trump has discussed firing Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. According to Bloomberg, Trump's frustration with the U.S. central bank chief intensified after this week's interest rate rise and months of market losses. Bloomberg report also said Trump has talked about firing Powell many times in the past few days. The Fed raised interest rates on Wednesday for the fourth time in 2018, as U.S. stocks endured their worst week in a decade. Still, any attempt to fire Powell could be seen as undermining the Fed's traditional independence from the U.S. government.
And still to come tonight. Power outage threatens to disrupt morning service on high-speed rail. Special treat for the elderly this winter solstice.
做每件事都有代價，你聽咗幾多嘢，就肯定要還返更多。吸食可卡因同冰毒，呢一刻好嗨，以為減到壓，話咁快就乜都冇晒，剔到上癮，冇咗人生，值得咩？打186186，發短信去 WhatsApp、微信98186，企硬唔剔嘢。
Back to TVB News. A potential disruption to services on the high-speed railway was narrowly avoided this morning. 18 trains were cancelled at one point until emergency measures restored power. Pinky Wong reports.
The last thing travelers want to see on the notice board. This passenger, who had a scheduled train to Futian at 9:22 a.m., didn't know his train was cancelled until he arrived at the station. At around 5 this morning, the MTR announced 18 trains setting off to Futian from West Kowloon were cancelled due to a power supply problem. The cost of the breakdown? 2 of the 3 132 kilovolt cables supplying electricity to the Shakong power substation failed to operate during regular maintenance work. CLP Power, the power company responsible for electricity supply, apologized for the inconvenience caused. An investigation is underway, and a report will be submitted to the government later. Train services resumed about an hour after the power failure, after the MTR arranged for power from a mainland rail services unit. 18 trains eventually set off at their scheduled time of departure. The MTRC also tried to do remedial work. Even though staff tried to contact affected passengers who provided their phone numbers, not everyone received their call. This mom wasn't even aware her train was cancelled and said no one called her about this. Passengers who could not get on their planned train because of the power failure could get a refund or exchange tickets at West Kowloon Station. The station opened in late September, providing short-haul routes to Guangdong and longer services to places like Beijing. Pinky Wong, TVB News.
It's winter solstice tonight, when families gather for big hearty meals and traditionally start preparing for the colder months ahead. And as Haley Joel reports, some 300 underprivileged senior citizens were treated to a special meal for the festival.
A busy wet market in Kowloon City on the morning of the shortest day of the year. Bags of fresh vegetables in their hands as people get ingredients for their hearty winter solstice dinners tonight. But not everyone is happy. This pork seller says the African swine fever outbreak on the mainland has raised the import price of pork. Fewer people are buying pork for their winter solstice meals, making him worried about his business. Because of fears about the swine fever outbreak, instead of pork, seafood and rice dumplings seem more popular this year. It's winter solstice. We are going to have rice dumplings today, these ladies say. Another consumer says she has spent about $3,000 to buy chicken, lobster, abalone, and shrimp. Seafood dishes are also on the menu at this lunch at Kowloon Bay. In for a treat were some 300 underprivileged senior citizens. As of October this year, more than 143,000 elderly in the city are living on Social Security payments of about $4,000 per month, give or take, depending on their health status. For them, a table full of food and having family around is often something they can't afford. But not today.
We will have arrange the kids long kids magic show and also lucky draw and give away for them, and also especially the delicious meal for them.
Dozens of dishes are served, including sweet corn and fish soup, steamed fish, and mushroom and shrimp noodle. More importantly, they enjoy each other's company.
In addition to this meal, senior citizens also receive the goodie bag each. Inside there are some daily items such as oil and noodles, but to prepare for a drop in temperature, some heat packs as well. Haley Joe, TVB News.
Police seized weapons and drugs as they raided various entertainment outlets in Tsim Sha Tsui. Knives, torches, and batons were taken away from bars on Cameron Road and Hillwood Road. Officers also found drugs, including cocaine, valued at $250,000. A dozen people aged between 21 and 62 have been arrested, some for suspected drug trafficking. Thousands of anti-government protesters took to the streets of the Hungarian capital. Demonstrators have been rallying outside Parliament in Budapest and also been marching towards other government offices. The mob has been upset over labor changes and corruption in the country. Prime Minister Viktor Orban's government recently passed labor laws that allow companies to request 400 hours of overtime from its workers. Payment can also be delayed up to 3 years for that extra work. A new court system was also created that is totally under government rule. Protests in the country started about a week ago.
Canada has stepped up the pressure on Beijing, demanding the release of a pair of its citizens. Canadian Foreign Minister Chrystia Freeland demanded the immediate release of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor and called their detentions arbitrary. The two were taken into custody earlier this month for vague allegations of engaging in activities that endanger the national security of China. Many believe they were detained as retaliation for Canada's arrest of a top Chinese executive. The apprehensions came just days after Canada arrested Meng Wanzhou at the request of the US. She is the CFO of tech giant Huawei and is alleged to have misled banks about business dealings with Iran. Chinese billionaire Richard Liu will not face charges over a rape accusation by a Chinese woman studying in Minnesota. US prosecutors say they could not prove his guilt beyond reasonable doubt. Liu, founder of the Beijing-based e-commerce site JD.com, was arrested on August 31st in Minneapolis on suspicion of rape. He was released within hours and returned to China. Prosecutors say there were profound problems with the evidence, which would have made it highly unlikely the accusation against Liu could have been proven beyond reasonable doubt. That's the news.
Thanks for joining us.